Demosthenes. I am ready to paint with the colors of the wind. Hopefully, I won't have to use my red ink pen too much.
Ooh. So we've come around the river bend to finally talk about Pocahontas. I kind of figured we've already talked about The Hunchback of Notre Dame, whether or not it's the Disney Renaissance's most underrated animated film. And we've also talked about Hercules.
Demos needs a hug.
So
Anyways.
with the Disney Renaissance, it's kind of crazy when you think about how much of a quick turnaround Disney had. By 1985, with the release of The Black Cauldron, sharks were circling the Walt Disney Company. And within 6 years, they went from Black Cauldron, Death at the Box Office, to Beauty and the Beast being nominated for Best Picture.
Right?
So Disney, with Beauty and the Beast, they tasted gold. They wanted that Oscar, and they tried to achieve that Oscar by putting their top animators on Pocahontas. And yeah, it didn't turn out so well, especially in the wake of The Lion King. So, Kyle, you hadn't seen Pocahontas until, the other day to do this episode. What did you think going into it? What were your expectations of Pocahontas?
You have the same expectation with this kind of story, right? This isn't exactly the first sort of telling of this, where you have, the air quotes civilized, modernized group that meets up with the indigenous, less air quotes advanced tribe. And listen, I was setting the bar pretty low. So long as this thing didn't bore me like Dances with Wolves did, it had a shot, and obviously it did better than that in my mind. I have to say, I want to give it away how much I liked or disliked it, but it went pretty well for me. It met my expectations at the very least of what I thought it was going to be. Now the execution on some things, I'm sure there's at least one thing we're going to talk about later in the episode that'll kind of lead in that direction.
I saw Pocahontas back in 1995. In fact, my family and I even went up to Jamestown, Virginia. They made it a point to take me there before I saw the movie, so I can get a better taste of the history surrounding this film. It's one of the trips I do appreciate very well, because this isn't historically accurate. In fact, I think that if they should have gone with the original title that they were planning, The Legend of Pocahontas, because this is very much about the legend than historical accuracy. If you're expecting a bearded, wily, crazy John Smith and a 12-year-old topless Pocahontas having a love story in a Disney film, you're out of your goddamn mind. This is far removed from history. But does that change or affect the overall message it's trying to convey? And I think that's something that's definitely up for discussion. I liked the film when I was a kid. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I thought that the animation, most of all, was absolutely stunning. And this is a time where every Disney film that came out had its own distinct look. Pocahontas, the angular designs of the characters, the color scheme, it didn't look like Beauty and the Beast. It didn't look like Little Mermaid. Try to compare Tangled to Frozen. It's almost like they're sequels to each other. They're so similar. I think that, and there are some differences in the Disney films now, but I don't think they're as artistically distinct as they used to be back then, in my opinion.
Yeah, if you try to compare Frozen and Tangled, you can't do it because they are the same, exactly. And what I felt like with Pocahontas, what I kind of walked away with it, especially in more in some scenes than others, but like when you see her standing on the edge somewhere where they're doing the signature, she's standing somewhere looking majestic while that her hair is flowing through the wind for the with the colors of the wind and all that, however you want to put it. I almost feel like they're trying to portray a almost like a 3D cave painting. Not that they actually had 3D stuff back then as they know it now, but like I had that element of hey, those cave paintings that are usually stick figures, let's put flesh on that and flesh out that piece of art. And what you got as a result was kind of the feel, in my opinion, of what they were trying to capture in Pocahontas.
That's an interesting way to say it. I think the only criticism I had of the art, and you probably even notice that when you see normal Disney characters, you'll see like very big eyes, much more cartoony and expressive. Pocahontas, much smaller, a little bit more realistic. But every time you saw her face straight on, her nose really bothered me. It just looks like two alien slits. She almost looks like she's one of Voldemort's ancestors with a nose like that.
The one character for me that didn't land was Grandmother Willow. Listen, that thing looked creepy. Okay? That did not sit well with the Kyle. I mean, granted, you started to realize her voice and what it is she actually was, so you were able to kind of talk your way out of it. But listen, when John Smith comes across that for the first time, no wonder he's creeped the hell out.
That tree is talking to me. What do you say to a Disney film where none of the animals talk because they want to be realistic, quote unquote, but the fucking tree talks? Her personality was fun, but that's all. That was about it. And the fact that she has the power to come alive and whip some of the settlers in the asses, and yet literally just stays there rooted while Kokom attacks and doesn't do a damn thing. They're right there. It literally goes A to B from supernatural presence to one of the most dramatic and violent scenes ever put to a Disney film.
Yeah, no, and again, the same problem you had with Notre Dame. Indeed, you listen. It goes from hellfire into a whimsical song. Dear Christ, what do? You know,
almost in concordance with Pocahontas trying to find her own direction. It's like the film is trying to find its direction at times. Does it want to be more whimsical, Disney-like? Of the past with Pocahontas, hang out by talking trees with her forest friends and so forth? Or does it want to be this passionate, bittersweet, historical romance? Those two elements, especially when portrayed back to back, don't quite fit. Of course,
Absolutely.
The biggest name attached to this project, and this was a big year for this actor because 1995, he also directed and starred in another historical tale called Braveheart, Mel Gibson as John Smith. Now, you had posed a question towards me a while ago, and you put out a Default Assault Extra all about it. John Smith versus Phoebus. Well, I went with Kevin Kline as Phoebus.
You didn't just say that you went with Phoebus. You did everything short of a crime against. What you did was a felony against John Smith. But here's the problem. It was absolutely goddamn warranted. And I don't mean that in the sense that John Smith was bad per se. He just wasn't Phoebus. Kevin Kline is a man, and he's fantastic. And listen, I'll take him over Mel Gibson every day of the week. That's right, I said it.
Although, if you want to see Mel Gibson singing in a movie, this is your chance.
All of my life I have searched for a land like this one.
Sure, absolutely. Not a horrible voice. It's certainly better than Danny DeVito. But hey, if I got the bar any lower, you'd be hitting an ant in the forehead. No, seriously, it wasn't bad. I kind of dug it. But what I can see, and I'm glad you brought this up, Demos, because it leans into an overall greater point. I began to struggle with remembering. I actually texted you during the movie. Wait, which movie was worse again? I couldn't remember because when I watched Pocahontas, I saw so much Hunchback of Notre Dame in it.
How so?
Okay. I now understand, for example, why Phoebus is far superior to John Smith. It's because John Smith is the evolution, or check that, Phoebus is the evolution of the John Smith character. They took John Smith, realized he was plain as hell. That's why you didn't get any Oscars for him. And you had Mel effing Gibson, and you still missed the mark to make that happen. I could see ways. We need to give him some bleeping character. Well, who could give him character? Well, first of all, we need to work on that villain. Sure, he had the best songs in the whole movie, but he wasn't dark enough. I mean, I want him setting fire to an entire city. It should be hellfire. That could be the next song even. Work on it, Johnson. Oh, by the way, we need somebody who's more fun. Like, listen, I don't need a dude shouting freedom and wearing blue makeup on his face and cutting people's heads off. Well, there was this guy who was in A Fish Called Wanda. He's pretty funny. Kevin Kline. Yes, make it happen. Now, what do we do? Little things like that. Hell, the birds that were flying around at the top of certain high-rise buildings, not high-rise buildings, but like taller buildings in London before they sailed off into the blue yonder of the sea. That shit came straight out of Notre Dame. You just changed the buildings a little bit. There was a lot of stuff that I could yep, there's Notre Dame in there and this and here and there. I'm not saying they ripped it off, but the gentle hits, those shades of colors in the wind would very soon be spun into red.
Well, it's kind of funny because with the exception of Hellfire, which is by far Disney's darkest song, incredible. An argument can easily be made that with the exception of Hellfire, the song Savages from Pocahontas is by far the darkest Disney song. In fact, like Aladdin, whose Arabian Nights song was censored at release. The original lyrics were where they cut off your ear if they don't like your face, and it was changed to where the heat is intense, etc., etc., etc. The song Savages was also edited in the original version, which is funny enough, just like Aladdin, the original version is the soundtrack release version. It gets even darker than what you saw on film.
Their skins are hellish red. They're only good when dead. They're vermin, as I said, and worse.
Listen, I was like, this is getting dark. And they're talking about killing an engine or two or three or whatever in songs previous in the song, and yet they find a way to step it up over than that. But the payoff comes when they shift over to the Indians' reprise, and they're screaming savages of the white settlers. Dude, that was epic as bleep. And I don't give a damn. Every song that involves Radcliffe is gold in this movie. Just Around the River Bend is whimsical and cute, and I liked it a lot. Beats the shit out of anything, basically, the Hunchback did in Notre Dame. That's right, I said it, I'm sorry. But anything with Radcliffe in it musically was G-O-L-D gold. And yet, ironically, he couldn't find a single goddamn bit of it in Jamestown.
And the funny thing is, though, I mean, if you think about Radcliffe, that character's entire personality it comes out in song. When he's not singing, I'm not particularly fond of the character. He's very one note, but give the man a mic and he's a karaoke legend.
I think they had a much more difficult task in front of them in terms of Pocahontas than in Notre Dame, because everything that touches on Native American content like that is going to be sensitive. The only thing that's more risky, and I think even Big TJ would agree with me at this juncture with all our examinations, is to deal with any sort of pre-Civil War era where you have to introduce slavery. That's the only time it gets more, controversial in American history, is when something like that is going on.
And this is just from my perspective, obviously. I thought the way the Native Americans represented was actually very respectable. If anything, they could have lightened up a little bit. But I thought that they did that very, very well. And it took some guts for Disney to actually set it up so there is that animosity on both sides during Savages.
Oh, by the way, did you notice the part that in the open of the movie, where is Pocahontas' father returning from? War with another tribe.
Exactly. I think that's actually much more respectable than completely whitewashing it. And I think this is the biggest issue that people have with this movie. I wonder if these would be ideals that could easily be, or issues that could easily be overlooked if it was a completely fictional story. The moment that they tie history, I mean, Radcliffe was a real person, John Smith was a real person, etc., and then you oversimplify the situation, I think that's where the discord comes into play.
Listen, Leonard Nimoy didn't come out and say, and this is Daniel Radcliffe on biography. Shit didn't happen. Okay, so you're not wrong, but I don't think it's billing itself as a history lesson. Moreover, if you haven't figured out that historical inaccuracy is something you're going to get in a production involving Mel Gibson, you're doing it wrong.
Well, I guess we can talk a little bit about the history of it. And I already alluded to the fact. Okay, let's skip the fact that let's skip the aesthetic. Okay, the shores of Virginia don't exactly look like that.
They do not.
I've been to Virginia. Let's skip beyond the fact that if Pocahontas decided to cliff dive from the height of the Empire State Building, she would be it'd be a very short movie.
Pocahontas, are you all right?
If I never knew you.
Yeah.
And let's get it beyond the fact that obviously she would have had half her head shaved. She would have been running around tattoos, topless, etc. You're not going to see that in a kid's film. I can even understand, although this is getting a little more towards murky waters, about the fact that they build it as a love story, and yet it's dubious if this even happened. If the point of legend where she saves him, it's dubious if that happened, because if you look at John Smith's own memoirs, he noted similar things happening in other parts of the world to him. Apparently, women always wanted to save him from execution. Maybe he just had a spectacular beard. I don't know.
Listen, big beards can make the difference sometimes.
Tell that to Riker.
Listen, when he was clean shaven, I thought he was just a pansy of an officer. Then he grew that beard out. I'm like, sup,
he
stud?
does look weird without the beard. Anyway, but for Pocahontas, Riker's beard. He did end up going back to England because of an injury, funny enough. So that's actually similar. Not saving the chief's life, but a gunpowder. He had a gunpowder bag went off next to him, and he ended up. I always thought it was ridiculous. If you were to ask me when I was a kid, what is the stupidest thing in Pocahontas, I would have said the guy got shot, so 7 months at sea is going to be the best thing for him.
Exactly. Thank you. Good God Almighty Christ in heaven. I'm glad someone else feels that way.
However, he did get injured in a similar fashion, and he did end up having to go back to England in real life because of the injury. Legend has it that Pocahontas had heard that he had died on that voyage, and then when she married John Rolfe and went to England and she saw him there, she was kind of pissed.
Why you not dead? Yeah, I could see that.
And why wasn't John Rolfe in the movie? They did put him in the direct-to-video sequel. I'm not going to talk about it, but why wasn't he in the movie? It was because he was a big tobacco farmer.
Oh,
they left that part out in the sequel. I wonder why. The one poor asshole who got the most disservice out of all of this was Ratcliffe. He was only chosen because of his name, strictly because of Ratcliffe. That's it. He was based on other guys. The real Ratcliffe wanted to open up dialogue between him and the Indians. He extended the olive branch to the Native Americans more so than John Smith. He ended up getting captured, tied to a tree, stripped naked, and had his the skin of his body peeled off with mussel shells by the women of the tribe. They saved his face for last before he eventually died.
Ouch.
But he gets a kick-ass song, so all is well.
Wow. So, yeah. That kind of makes you rethink that Savages song. Anyways, wow. Thanks for the history lesson.
So, I mean, it is historically inaccurate, but it doesn't really bother me when the film does get more serious. When in the latter half of the film, when it actually does, essentially from the moment that it's basically past Colors of the Wind that I find the film to get more interesting when he's captured. The song Savages, where they're actually dealing with the issues that they were kind of flirting with towards the first half of the film. And yeah, that's what I find it the most interesting, but that's also the part where people start having the biggest problem with it. If you look at some of the criticisms levied against the film, even Native Americans, descendants from the tribe, have very mixed opinions on it. Chief Roy Crazy Horse said that it distorted history beyond recognition. It perpetuated honest and self-serving myth at the expense of the Powhatan Nation. While Native American activist Russell Means, who also actually played Chief Powhatan, called it the finest feature film on American Indians that Hollywood has ever turned out. So, very mixed opinions. Pocahontas definitely came a long way from Peter Pan, What Makes the Red Man Red. But I think that And this actually supports what I said in the Phoebus vs. John Smith video. And I think one of the biggest flaws with Pocahontas is they tried to play it as politically correct as they would in the 90s. They distilled this film down to a point where almost few of the characters actually had any real character to them. John Smith comes across as boring. Pocahontas has some terrific facial expressions. I think that the first scene where she meets John Smith in the waterfall, it's very subtle, very well done. But what is her character motivation? At first, at the very least, I had this dream, and I'm going to spend this whole film trying to figure it out and figure out this arrow in my dream. They're trying to appeal to all audiences while not focusing on one.
Yeah. No, that's totally right. And matter of fact, let the record show that I've called out the similarities between Notre Dame and, of course, Pocahontas here tonight, and I find another consistency between the two. Your opinion of them. Oh, it was babyfied. It had the same problem as like an opera does, right? Everybody takes 10 months to die, but 10 seconds to fall in love or get angry, right? It's crazy. And that's exactly what happened here. But if this is supposed to be aimed at children, which it is, do you have time or does it make sense to really kind of flesh that out? I'm a little concerned you might be watching it a little too much as an adult. That's just my opinion. But that isn't to say what you're saying isn't there. I think you just hold it too much
Here's
against
the thing.
the film.
I don't think that this really condemns the film in my eye. It lessens it, yes. In fact, if anything, I think the Hunchback, although it did suffer from the same problem, had much more direction behind it. That has much more to do with the Victor Hugo story. They were dealing with something more concrete. Yes, it's a Disney-fied version of that story. Yes, it's a bastardization in many ways of what was Victor Hugo's tome. Yet, it still had that skeleton in place to hang its story on. Pocahontas, they were making a lot of it up as they went. The animated gargoyles made more sense in Hunchback as a soundboard for Quasimodo in many more ways than freaking Miko and Flitz, the raccoon and the hummingbird did in this film. Yes, I understand they were a metaphor for the English and the Indians. I get that. But in the grand scheme of things, they had much, much less to do in the story. Although, I do congratulate them on that one gag of Miko's tail turning into like a dartboard. That shit was awesome. I like the music in this film. This has some of the best music out of any Disney movie from the decade. And to this day, I think that we've cited some of the very best. Mine, Mine, Mine. One of the most underrated villain songs. One of the most fun villain songs. It's very in some ways it's very similar to Gaston in that it's a showstopper. It's not so much. There's obviously the I'm a bad guy element to it, but it's in many ways. This is the only song in the movie that's the showstopper. This song is the Be Our Guest, the Under the Sea, the wild fun song of Pocahontas. It's a goddamn villain song.
If you're looking for a debate here, you don't have one. I already told you Radcliffe brought his own gold on the trip. I don't know why he needed an expedition. During Savages, you have that imagery of the two puffs of smoke from the two clouds of the camps and then kind of be their own militias bouncing into each other or clashing into each other overhead in the sky was excellent imagery.
In many ways, it's much more of a musical than perhaps Lion King and Aladdin. Music is very, very much on the forefront of this film, and the climax that it has with Savages, especially the second part with Pocahontas singing as she races towards the almost battle. it's compelling shit.
Yeah,
I wouldn't even venture to say that the very ending of the film, where she races to the top of the cliff, and then her mother's spirit or the wind catches up to her and then goes towards the ship and they wave goodbye. I think that's one of the most bittersweet but beautiful scenes, that alone, that Disney ever has done. There's so much that I love in this film, which bothers me because it's laced in a project that should have been better, but it really did feel directionless. Like they were trying to just appease everyone,
but just didn't have the backbone to stand up. I make the point earlier that they're obviously targeting this to kids. So I had to use my get out of jail free card on it, where like first John Smith meets Pocahontas, and now everybody can speak English together all of a sudden because she kind of had a spiritual moment with it. That was weird. But that's really the only weak point of it overall. Sure, John Smith was kind of boring, but I think it fit into the character because they're bringing him along because he's basically the strong man that could take out the savages. That's why he's even here.
I mean, it makes sense to condense the plot. It makes sense for them to come up with an interesting way to get past the language problem. I think that they handled it pretty well, considering, in consideration between Pocahontas and John Smith, that they listened to their hearts and they're able to communicate. But what about everybody else? Was there a scene where Ratcliffe listened to his heart, smelled the wind, and can understand the Indians?
This white man threatens us, but his words are found in song, and he sings like a beauty. It would be a shame to take him and his man down.
The white man listened to his heart, and now we can communicate. Fast forward 100 years. So yeah, I wouldn't call it required viewing. I would actually recommend it because, like I said before, it has terrific songs. It is possibly the most beautifully animated film from the Renaissance.
I mean, listen, if you're making a choice between this and Hercules, it's clear. I'm just saying.
I mean, so what do you guys think of Pocahontas? Did you like it? Do you think it's one of the best of the Disney Renaissance? Do you think it's underrated? Do you find it controversial? Let us know what you guys think in the comments below, and let us know what other Disney films we should cover. Should we cover more Disney Renaissance stuff, or should we go back to some of the classics, or perhaps even cover something new? Let us know. Kyle, where can we find you?
You know, I know we didn't talk about Frozen tonight, but now you just really completely just remixed it for let us know. Anyways,
God damn it.
we probably female vocalist to do that. Anyways, of course, you can find me on Twitter at the SOTG, and of course, you can find me on Facebook as a student of the game, and also on Instagram, the SOTG. Check out my good works on either Break the Fourth or BlueHQmedia.com. Both are Blue HQ LLC Productions. Good times all the way there. Don't forget to check out Dinner Time on Tuesday nights on Blog Talk Radio, and of course, here with Demos.
And of course, you can find me on hilaritybydefault.com, where we have fun stuff every week, on Facebook and Instagram, Hilarity by Default, on Twitter at Default Hilarity, and right here on Default Assault, where life is hilarious by default.